Call the Honourable Member Carol Beaumont.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. It is a great pleasure to rise and speak to this bill and to acknowledge my colleague, Grant Robertson, who I believe has taken this matter very seriously in bringing forward the Royal Society of New Zealand Amendment Bill, and I acknowledge his work on this and his representation of this organisation, which is based in the electorate that he so ably represents, Wellington Central. Now, as others have said, the purpose of this bill, I just thought I'd remind people, is to amend the Royal Society of New Zealand Act 1997 to incorporate the humanities in the object and functions of the Royal Society, to rename the Academy, Academy Council, amend the standard for the election of companions of the Society and amend the election processes for councillors of the Society. I want to just talk about one of those in this call, although later on I do want to come back to others. But incorporating the humanities into the object and functions is really the core part of this, and I think it's very, very important that this is done. I think it makes a great deal of sense. And for myself, and others have talked about their areas of studies, I did a degree in social sciences. Now, arguably, that would already fall under the authority of the Royal Society of New Zealand, that social sciences would be seen as science for the purpose of currently belonging to the Royal Society of New Zealand. However, when you look at a subject or a series of subjects, you can see that a number of them are made up of different components. You take the subject of geography, which was the subject that I majored in, and human geography, if you like, is certainly a social science. Physical geography is clearly a science. And there is something in between all of that when you're looking at people's relationship with the land and how they organise and place themselves on the land, which is what the study of geography is really about. And that can be conveyed through poem, through music, through art, through a whole range of mechanisms which one might call the humanities. So in fact, many subjects are effectively interdisciplinary in nature, and it seems to me that one of the advantages of this change is to recognise that there are many, many subjects that in fact touch across a whole range of what that traditional, division. It really makes that no longer that useful. Take environmental studies. Again, you could equally see that would have both physical, social and the humanity elements in it. I want to give a particular example, actually, because it's one that I've recently been looking at, and that's the issue of violence against women. Now, you might study this issue at a university, for example, as part of women's studies, or you might study it as part of sociology, you might study it as part of history, and which of those is a humanity? You could study that issue, and in fact the reality is it is interdisciplinary. So the fact of the matter is that creating this new object and function of the Royal Society, I think, is entirely appropriate. And I just want to illustrate that a little bit more. At a conference I was at over the weekend, we were talking about the issue of violence against women, which, as many in this chamber would know, is a very serious and troubling and pervasive problem. Now, you could look at it from the point of view of the history of this problem. What is it? What is it that society has experienced over generations in relation to violence against women, and where has that come from? What has been the reason, the underlying reason that women face sexual and other forms of physical violence? What has created that? Is it something that is an issue of power, perhaps? Is it a view that men own women and can treat them in any way that they want? And certainly if you looked at the relationship between men and women in a historical context, you might come to that conclusion. Now, at this conference that I was at, and this is in Australia over the weekend, we got shown this T-shirt. And this is really illustrative, I guess, of what you might loosely call art. So a humanity which is now being incorporated under this provision into the objects of the Royal Society. Now, this T-shirt had a very ugly drawing of a woman who was bound, who was bleeding, and the words that went with that were, "Relax, it's just sex." Now, that's a deeply troubling image. That image is quite powerful, I think. The words are powerful, the image is powerful. Mr Chair.
I call the honourable member Carol Beaumont.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. My point really is that up to that point in the conversation at the conference, we'd been talking about numbers. We'd been talking about the number of women that suffer from violence, that have violence inflicted upon them. We've been talking about politics. What was the political response? And just while I'm talking about that, might I note that $86 million of new money has gone into the issue of violence against women and girls in Australia, $86 million of new money, and an agreement over 12 years, a plan over 12 years to really tackle this issue. And I, of course, sitting there could only but compare that to what was going on in New Zealand, where, in fact, we are cutting funding in the area of violence against women, where refuges have had funding cut by 700,000, where Te Rito and child advocates have been their funding cut. And my point really was, this was a political discussion. This was a political discussion around the issue of violence against women and children. At that point, this T-shirt was shown.
Point of order. Remember.
I'm really struggling to work out how this fits with the purpose of this bill. And I ask for your assistance in that matter.
Well, I'm listening to it, and it's a wide-ranging debate, and it has been for the whole debate, and I'm quite happy to let the member go, but I would caution you to try and keep it pretty much to the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I think the point I'm trying to make, and I'll just spell it out for the member opposite so that it is clear, under the objects it says that this is to include and incorporate the humanities in the objects and functions of the society. The point I was really making is that social sciences are already included in the definition of the Royal Society and in their coverage, and the physical sciences, if you like, are already included, and what is being added in is what one might call the humanities. What I was really trying to point out, just so the member opposite understands, is that many areas now of study are in fact interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary, and elements of all three of those things may come into play. The example I was giving, because it was foremost in my mind, because it was so powerful, was the issue of domestic violence and the study of domestic violence. And there are a number of different subject areas, including those in the humanities, that go to trying to explain what this problem is about and the consequences of it. And the T-shirt I referred to was a graphic representation that somebody had made. Now, they weren't doing it for shock value. This was actually something on sale as a, if you like, a serious but very troubling statement of attitudes about violence towards women. My point really was the politics probably are covered as a social science. The imagery and the words of something like that T-shirt, which say a great deal about the issue about violence against women and girls, perhaps wouldn't be. The value of this change to the Royal Society Act is that it will incorporate the humanities, and this debate, or those distinctions, in fact, would not be relevant anymore. And so a topic like women's studies, a subject area like women's studies, a subject area like environmental studies, and many others which are interdisciplinary, would certainly not have any strange or arbitrary distinctions made in particular elements. And I think that's very important, because how we understand things as people and how we learn and how we convey knowledge is not all in one manner. And we can learn a great deal about particular topics by, for example, looking at a cartoon. A visual representation of an issue can actually often convey a great deal more than a chapter in a book. So I would support this, and I would acknowledge the work again of my colleague Grant Robertson in bringing this bill to the House, and I think it is important that we debate these types of distinctions, and I'm really looking forward to, I guess, outlining this a little bit further in terms of how the humanities and the definition of humanities, which after all is referred to in clause 4, the purpose of the Act, and it says, as I'll just read that again, incorporate humanities into the object and functions of the Royal Society of New Zealand. I think that definition of humanities, which of course is included in clause 5, will indeed be a lively debate, and I think that there has been some interesting discussion, as I understand it, in the Select Committee about that definition and whether it is sufficient to outline what we're talking about in the purpose of this Act or not. So with that, Mr Speaker, I say I look forward to resuming this debate later.
I call the honourable member